Hi everybody, this is Andrew from T is for Tech, and yesterday I was out with my family and we were kind of walking around in a town called Naperville near my house, and I thought I'd use this time to just do some recording of my DJI Osmo Pocket, and I was using an ND filter, 16 ND16 filter because it was pretty sunny out. And I recorded at 60 frames per second, and now I'm playing this all back at 24 frames per second. So what I was planning on doing is just showing a little bit of the stuff that I captured. None of it's too exciting. It's just just some video that I was capturing as we were walking around. And I'll set that to some music, and at the end I'll kind of show you the settings that I used to kind of create this effect in Premiere Pro. Now, as you can see, none of that footage was mind-blowing or anything, but the combination of filming it in 60 frames per second with the DJI Osmo Pocket and the smooth gimbal motion adds some music, and it really brings something cinematic to the footage. And as you can see, you can turn it into something quite nice. I'm going to end this right now, and I'll flip over and show you how I slowed this down using Premiere. So as you can see here, I am in Premiere Pro, and I have a basically a project and a sequence that I've set to be 24 frames per second. So if you go here and you do your sequence settings, All right, so you can see what you want to do is set the time base to 24 frames per second, display format 24 frames per second time code, and that's really all I switched from like a default 30 frames per second or whatever sequence, right? So if you just make those two setting changes there and get the sequence in 24 frames per second, what you can do then is take your 59.94 or 60 frame per second video, pull that into your sequence. So I've already done this, so what I'll do is I'll just kind of go to the end of my little project here, and if I pull this guy out, you'll see this is the shot that I used at the beginning, and that was a 60 frames per second piece of footage. And you want to go in here and make sure that the time interpolation is set to frame sampling, and then you can just go and say, oops, sorry, and then you can go here in the speed duration and just do 40%. So 60 frames per second to 24 frames per second is about a 40% reduction. So if you do that and you leave the time interpolation to frame sampling and you say OK, and then you'll basically get the footage slowed down to the 24 frames per second rate, and it'll be about 40% slower than this 60 frames per second. So that'll slow it down a little bit. And then what I did over here on the rest of the footage, because this was all 60 frames per second, so I just went over here and I did modify and I did interpret footage, and I set, so you can see here, use frame rate from the file, and that's the 60 frame, and I just went here and said assume this frame rate 24 frames per second, and then I don't have to mess with it anymore when I pull the footage out there, and it will just be already kind of interpreted at 24 frames per second and slowed down. So that just saves you a little bit of time when you're doing your editing. So that's about it. As you can see, that's pretty simple. And the key is just, you're filming it at a 60 frames per second and you're just slowing it down in post. And then when you're exporting it, you export the 24 frames per second sequence as 24 frames per second. And you should get that nice slowed down motion as part of your cinematic shots. So hopefully this was helpful, and if you have any questions, go ahead and drop those below. This is Andrew from TS for Tech. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.